Muy buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Jesse Silva. Good afternoon. My name is Jesse Silva. I use he, him, his pronouns. I have the esteemed privilege of serving as the Associate Director for Institutional Inclusive Excellence, Student Initiatives, and will be serving as moderator for today's program. On behalf of the Division of University Administration and Texas State University, we want to welcome you to the Hispanic Heritage Month kickoff featuring the phenomenal Dr. Laura Rendon, Professor Emerita. Hispanic Heritage Month is held from September 15th to October 15th, and as an important time to recognize and honor the many people, contributions, cultures, and histories and experiences of our Hispanic Latinx community, and as members of a global majority whose ancestors span multiple continents and generations. Throughout the United States and the world, we participate in national celebrations, festivals, community gatherings, conferences, and in honor of our ancestors who fought for independence, liberty, and social justice. September 15th through October 15th marks the anniversaries of the decolonization of Latin American countries from British, Spanish, Portuguese, and French colonizers. They include Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua, September 15th, Mexico, September 16th, Chile, September 18th, and Belize, September 21st. Of course, we know that independence is not limited to the month-long window and was achieved by Brazil, Panama, Peru, Puerto Rico, Uruguay, and Venezuela, and that will be celebrated nationally in the coming months. Equally important, this is not meant to overlook the number of countries and people still seeking independence. Pero Jesse Silva, what about Cinco de Mayo? Great question. Cinco de Mayo honors the victory of Mexico's army against the French Empire in 1862 in the Battle of Puebla, 50 plus years after Mexico gained independence from Spain. Cinco de Mayo honors Mexico's resistance to colonization after establishing independence. So history matters. It is through the recognition of this history that we honor the experiences of our ancestors and how we honor our people today. So in keeping with our comunidad, I would like to give a shout out to all of our gente who are watching, and that includes but not limited to Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Cuba, República Dominicana, Ecuador, El Salvador, Guatemala, Haiti, Honduras, Nicaragua, Panamá, Paraguay, Perú, Puerto Rico, España, Uruguay, Venezuela. And I think I might have, no, I didn't. And of course, that includes mi México, lindo y querido. Que viva México. So at Texas State University, we have a special connection to how Hispanic Heritage Month became a national observation in the United States. It was our very own President Lyndon Baines Johnson, Texas State class of 1930, who helped to observe Hispanic Heritage Week in 1968 during his administration, and that would later be expanded to a month in 1988. And of course, in my household, Hispanic Heritage Month is celebrated every month. Well, because wearing this beautiful melanated skin is a year-round kind of thing. Throughout the program and during this time at Texas State, we will use the words Hispanic and Latinx and oftentimes interchangeably. It is important that we provide some context as to why. Hispanic and Latinx, like other terms including mestizo, mestiza, mestizex, chicano, chicano, chicanx, are ways for persons to identify. These terms are being used as unifiers for the purpose of solidarity. Language, like our food, cultures, and identities, evolved and is deeply rooted in our history, a history of indigeneity and colonialism. Hispanic refers to persons of ancestries of countries whose primary language is Spanish and connected to Hispania, that we know as Spain. The term was officially used in the United States in the 1970s to create a universal way to classify Spanish-speaking groups. Latinx refers to persons of ancestries of Latin America, which includes North, Central, and South America. The X is in Latinx replaces and disrupts the binary masculine O and feminine A spelling in the conventional to Spanish grammar, and to be more inclusive of our gender expression and sexual orientation within our community. Again, these terms are meant to serve as connections, not qualifiers. We understand that we represent a vast diaspora and intersectionality. While these terms are valuable descriptors of our beloved communities, to be able to integrate, to interrogate, and expand their conceptualization is one of the most decolonial acts we can perform. It is a way to regain the humanity of ourselves and to see the humanity of others within our own. Within our Pan-American experience, there is a beautiful and rich diversity that includes all of us, and all of our familia are included. So nosotros somos, we are. Somos de raíces indígenas. We are of many tongues and languages. We are first and multi-generational, migrants, immigrants, foreign-born and undocumented. We are LGBTQIA+, multiracial, biracial, including Afro-Latinx and Asian Latinx, persons with disabilities, formerly, currently incarcerated and detained. We are poor and working class, veterans, military service member, military connected. We are the hope and the promise fulfilled of our ancestors. Somos the global majority. Our familia, our history is bigger than these two identifiers. We are here to claim and reclaim it. So welcome to this Hispanic Heritage Month. And so before I transition it over, I want to give a huge shout out to our custodial, maintenance, operation, groundskeeping, and utility staff who have been working so hard indigenously around the clock to ensure the university is moving, thriving, and surviving. And I want to give another shout out to our faculty and staff who have been working to meet your needs. We certainly appreciate your hard work and commitment. And I want to give a kudos to Dr. Tony Moreno, Assistant Director for Hispanic and First Generation Retention, for all of her efforts in coordinating and co-leading this charge for Hispanic Heritage Month. So at this time, please welcome Dr. Sherry Venn, Assistant Vice President for Institutional Inclusive Excellence, Student Initiatives in the Division of University Administration, who will be offering some remarks.
Thank you, Jesse. Somos TXST. Somos Bobcats. We are Texas State, and we are Bobcats. And we are proud to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. Thank you, Jesse. And on behalf of Institutional Inclusive Excellence and the College of Education, I want to thank you for joining us today in what has become one of our new normals, virtual community engagement. It is indeed an experience that we are all learning to navigate and at times struggling to get used to. And still, we are grateful that you have decided to join us today for our Hispanic Heritage Month kickoff. It is important that I acknowledge our program with such a distinguished justice educator, author, and researcher, Dr. Rendon. This would not have been possible without the sponsorship of a number of different areas. And so I want to thank them and also acknowledge their contributions and sponsorship to this program. Our Texas State University TRIO programs, Developing Hispanic Serving Institutions, Faculty Senate, and Faculty Development. Thank you so much. And Faculty Development, I want to give a little shout out because they will be providing a copy of Dr. Rendon's book to each one of the academic colleges. So thank you, Faculty Development, for that. Thank you for your enthusiastic and collaborative support to each one of our sponsors. And thank you, as Jesse just stated earlier, but I also would be remiss if I did not also thank Dr. Tony Moreno for your unwavering determination to bring the brilliance of Dr. Rendon to Texas State University and to this virtual gathering of celebration and education. You brought this to fruition. Thank you so much. The support of our sponsors demonstrates the type of collaborative partnerships that help to elevate and further our advancement of a campus community that fosters inclusive ways of knowing, learning, being, and teaching that empower historically disenfranchised populations. This type of inclusivity ties directly to educational equity and our need and commitment to continuously fostering a pipeline of students from early education to and through college. For as we know, the journey into the post-secondary experience is an expedition that actually begins years before students and their families ever arrive to our campus. I want to give a special thanks to our co-sponsor, the College of Education, for their partnership. Thank you, Dean O'Malley, and to our College of Education students, staff, and faculty for your enthusiastic support and for your collaboration in our celebration, our educational celebration. And with that said, I'd like to turn the program over to Dr. Michael O'Malley, Dean of the College of Education, and he will introduce our honored guest. Dean O'Malley.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Ben, very much. Many thanks to everyone who helped organize today's events and who invited all of us to be part of it. Bienvenidos a todas y todos de parte de la Facultad de Educación y los decanos de todas las facultades. Estamos muy felices de comenzar con ustedes este mes, celebrando las culturas y los pueblos latinos, aquí en los Estados Unidos y a través del mundo latinoamericano. Gracias a la comunidad latina, sus culturas, historias y experiencias, somos una mejor universidad. Mi esposo es de Chile y él sigue con las tradiciones de su país. En Chile, como México en otros países, como dijo Jesse, celebran sus días de independencia en septiembre. Y por eso en nuestra casa ya estamos haciendo un montón de empanadas y comida chilena. Felices fiestas a todos. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome our guest speaker today, Dr. Laura Rendon, and to introduce her on behalf of the university and certainly on behalf of all the colleges here at Texas State who join us in entering and celebrating and being grateful for Hispanic Heritage Month. Dr. Rendon is Professor Emerita at the University of Texas at San Antonio. Her work focuses on student success, sensing, thinking, deep learning experiences, as well as self-care and healing. A native of Laredo, Texas, Dr. Rendon's passion is ensuring that the nation's educational system fosters success for all students, especially those who are low income and first generation. Dr. Rendon developed validation theory, an asset-based student success framework that has been employed to frame research studies and programmatic activities in 2- and 4-year colleges and universities. Dr. Rendon is also a teaching and learning theorist and thought leader. She is author of the book Sentipensante, Sensing Thinking Pedagogy, Educating for Wholeness, Wellness, Justice, and Liberation, as well as numerous publications focusing on student success and contemplative education. She is a fellow of the Mind and Life Institute, a member of the board of directors of the John N Gardner Institute for Excellence in Undergraduate Education, and a former fellow of the Fetzer Institute. Dr. Rendon's personal archives are a part of the Nettie Lee Benson Latin American Collection at the University of Texas at Austin, one of the premier libraries in the world focused on Latin America and Latinx studies. Please join me in offering Dr. Rendon a very warm welcome to Texas State University.
Thank you so much, Dean O'Malley. Wow, it's such a great time to be with all of you. I was telling Tony I'm only about an hour away, but these days we've got to do things the way we've got to do them. So it's just great to be joining all of you, and I want to thank all the sponsors and everyone that played a hand in bringing me to do this virtual presentation for you. We're celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, y qué bueno, tenemos mucha cultura, mucha música, mucho arte, y hemos contribuido muchas cosas para nuestro país. So I'm really proud to be Hispanic as well, Mexican American, Chicana, from Laredo, Texas. I understand that a number of institutions are joining us today, including, I think, from Laredo. So hola, fellow Laredoans, and also the San Marcos school system. Welcome also to you. UTSA, where I spent the last part of my professional life in a university. So welcome to my colleagues there, as well as everyone else that is joining us today. So today's topic is teaching for wholeness and attending to self-care during the time of the pandemic. And I'm using some art. Nadine mentioned Chile, but this is the artist Liliana Wilson is Chilean. And she spent most of her life in Austin, Texas, attended Texas State University. So her art is very well known, and I'm very pleased to use it in this presentation. So let me begin with talking a little bit about how I step into this work, how I step into this inquiry about student success and holistic pedagogy. You see a picture of me in front of you, and that is me in the middle. This is my 6th birthday in Laredo. I wanted nothing more than a pair of moccasins, and my mom somehow found the funds to do it. And on my right is my little sister, Ileana, who went on to become a teacher in Laredo. And then on my left is my little cousin, Elma. And in the background, you can see the house where we used to live. It's not a very nice house. We grew up in poverty with very minimal resources. And so my journey to higher education and to being with you today has been, I believe, nothing short of extraordinary. How does a woman, little girl who grew up in poverty, get from the barrio of Laredo, Texas, to the academy to earn a doctorate from the University of Michigan, and who now speaks to faculty throughout the nation and internationally as well? How did she do it? And so what I've learned over time is that regardless of our situations, regardless of poverty, there are many extremely bright students there in these communities. We need to recognize that they have strengths, that they have a lot going for them, the strength of resilience, the strength of the family, the strength of resistance to micro and macroaggressions, the strength of navigational ability, figuring things out. And so I step into this inquiry knowing that I come from a place that made me who I am today. And so today's talk is really about, where we are right now. We've been dealt a card. It's not a card that we wanted. I mean, nobody wanted a pandemic. Nobody wanted COVID-19. Nobody even prepared for it. I keep thinking sometimes that we were walking along, just chatting, and then all of a sudden, boom, we're thrown over a cliff with no preparation, no warning. So we're kind of now finding ourselves in this dark hole and trying to climb out of that. And so we're getting there. It's going to take some time, but we're getting there. But we have a lot of challenges in front of us. Just yesterday, I did a talk around this time for Humboldt State University in California. And they're not only dealing with COVID, they're dealing with those devastating fires. So there's so many challenges that we have, our generation, we got this card. We've been asked to deal with these challenges. And at the same time, we have to now, as educators, think about what does this mean for us who teach students. What do we have, what did we miss in our education? So that students, if we had equipped them with everything that they needed to know to help us through the challenges that we're facing right now, how would our education have been different? What did we miss? What do we need to turn our attention to now? And so one of the questions here is, what is a holistic post-pandemic vision of education that can foster greater student success and assist students to deal with pressing equity and justice issues confronting our nation and our world? How do we help students walk in the world with both knowledge and wisdom, or as fellow Tejana Gloria Saldúa calls it, conocimiento? And how can we attend to self-care, healing, and well-being I'm learning that in this particular time, more and more, I'm getting asked to talk about issues of self-care, healing, and well-being. And rightly so, it's not just about academics, it's about taking care of ourselves. How do we meet this remarkable moment in our lives? How do we play this card that we've been given? So you see below so many challenges that actually predated the pandemic. There were really serious challenges that we don't have any real solutions for. We're struggling with these issues as well, all the way from systemic racism, anti-Black racism, police violence, gun violence, the oppression of undocumented students, the ICE raids, the rights of Native people, water insecurity, poverty, violence against the LGBTQ plus community and against people of color, poverty and the wealth divide. I mean, it goes on and on. And so I would like for you to think about if you had a magic wand and could assure that every student graduating from your institution was equipped with 1 or 2 key competencies that they needed to have to address these kinds of issues, what would those competencies be? I want you to list those in the chat box, and then I'm going to ask for Tony to help me and Jesse with really highlighting what you're writing in that chat box. I mean, if you could assure that students were to learn at least 1 or 2 things, I mean, it can be more than that. And it can range, I mean, the competencies can, think broadly about those competencies. What would those be? What would you like students to know? So Tony or Jesse, what's coming in?
So I'm monitoring the chat, and currently we are still pending a few responses. Mm-hmm. So the first response that came in is critical thinking.
Critical thinking, okay. Keep going.
Cultural intelligence.
Cultural intelligence, I like that, yeah. And again, they can be, think broadly. Let's see if we can get at least a couple of more. What would you like students to learn? What would you like students to master to help us with the issues listed below? What should they know?
So a number of you are raising your hand. Feel free to write your comment into the chat box, and I'm happy to read that aloud. And because a number of you are listed under Jaime Rodriguez, I apologize in advance. I know as Jaime is a phenomenal superstar, there's like a number of you identified as Jaime Rodriguez.
Okay, anything else then coming in?
Empathy, forgive me.
Empathy, yes, very important.
We've also got global leadership and understanding and connection to each other.
Connections, yes, relationships, absolutely. How to build relationships, yes.
I would like to include knowledge of intersectionality.
Knowledge of intersectionality, absolutely, very much needed, especially now. Yes. So yes, I mean, all of those are really, really important. And one of the things that, I mean, we're right in the middle of 2 worlds right now. The old world as we used to know it, and the new world that is emerging. In fact, in that middle space, Corina Saldúa would call that Nepantla. It's a liminal space, ni aquí ni allá, neither here nor there. It's not the most comfortable space, okay? But it is a space of possibility. It is a space that if we work through it, we can come out better. So let me share with you some of the outcomes that I've thought about. Deep self-knowledge, pluriversality. Let me say a little bit more about that because it's kind of a new term, I think, for many of us. This is our ability to function from a space that goes beyond either or thinking to embrace both and perspectives. It helps us to see not just 2 realities, but multiple realities. You know, in this nation, we've been, in some ways colonized to think about everything having a solution. It's either this or that. And we get into meetings and it's, okay, we got to do this or that. But we have to realize that, many times it's not just two options, but there might be a third or fourth or fifth way. And that is the competency of pluriversality, that we can think very broadly to embrace both and perspectives, pluriversality, a beautiful competency. Building community, that's already been mentioned. Critical consciousness has been mentioned. Empathy has been mentioned. The ability to step into the world of the other with respect and with dignity. I think compassion is something else that comes through for me. Appreciating and working with diversity. Self-care, healing, and well-being. The work of justice and equity is very tough work. So we need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. Connectedness in our relationship to the other. Understanding that the I is about the we, that our struggles and our pain are intertwined. Everything affects something else. Presence, being aware and present in the moment, and a sense of meaning and purpose, the truth of one's being. What do we hold most dear? What is our role on this earth? What were we brought here to do? Why do we do the work of education to begin with? What brought us here? What is that impulse that brought us to do what we do? So these are some of the competencies that I believe we kind of didn't pay too much attention to in the past because we were focused on academic development. Let me just make sure that I am all for academic development. I want our students to be super, super, super smart. I want them to read and to write and to, be in STEM. I want them to learn content. I want them to do all of that. But I also want them to be good human beings. I also want them to reach out to others and work in teams. I also want them to make this world a better place to live. And so we need to think about education in a holistic way. It's not this or that, it's both together. And so what kind of a pedagogy would we need to have so that we can develop students in a holistic fashion? I want to offer as a tool for this, my book, Sentipensante, Sensing, Thinking, Pedagogy. This is a holistic approach to teaching and learning. It's a culturally validating, deep learning experience that addresses the rhythmic connection between intellectual development and aspects of our humanity. So you see, I want to make sure here that you understand that Sentipensante Pedagogy is about intellectual development, but it's also about what makes us human beings. And to foster deep learning and conocimiento, we employ culturally validating illuminative knowledge tools to open the senses, so that we design learning projects to help students engage in deep learning activities. And those tools are periods of silence, music, poetry, arts-based projects, testimonios, ritual, cultural immersions, dance, prayer, altars, cultural healing practices, etc. There's a wide array of culturally validating illuminative knowledge tools, and I'm going to talk about some of those today. And these tools, we carefully select them. They're not going to be in play all the time, so we carefully select them with regard to the projects that we develop. And they go beyond intellectual understandings to include, for example, sense of meaning and purpose, empathy, self-knowledge, pluriversality, and critical consciousness. And one of my goals is to have this pedagogy connected to equity and justice issues. So let's talk more about this sentir y pensar, sensing, thinking, pedagogy. Let me just stop here and tell you that I've been working with a doctoral student from Colombia just recently. And in Colombia, they actually have a school that their whole thing is on Sentipensante. And it's not because of me, but Sentipensante is really a term that was developed by Orlando Fals Borda, who is a big name in South America. He's the one that kind of started participatory action research. And what Orlando was doing is he was working with the fishermen in the Colombian coast. And he was doing ethnographic research to see how it was that these fishermen were able to survive. They didn't have the education that you and I have, but they still had knowledge. They knew the seas, they knew the moon, they knew the stars, they knew the currents, and they told Orlando Fals Borda, somos sentipensantes, we are sentipensantes. And so I took that term, which is a really beautiful term, to apply it to this holistic approach to teaching and learning. Sentipensante, sensing, thinking, pedagogy. So I want to give you some examples of Sentipensante pedagogy that appear in my book, and I hope that some of these strategies and tools can be of assistance to you as you think about developing the whole person. The first example is my dear friend, Professor Alberto Pulido. He teaches ethnic studies at the University of San Diego. And the tools that he uses to foster deep learning include the arts-based Cajita project. I love this project. I've used it with my master's and doctoral students in Long Beach and at Iowa State, at UTSA. And you know, when I've used it, the results have been truly phenomenal. The Cajita project is, you know, it's a box, but it can take shape in, you know, many shapes and many forms. But I asked Dr. Pulido to tell me a little bit more about the Cajita project. And in ethnic studies, he uses the Cajita project around Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead. And he asked students to write essays and to create a box about people in their lives who have passed on that have had an impact on them. And he also asked students to think about their lives and what has meaning for them. So here's Dr. Pulido, and he's going to showcase one of the cajitas that his students made.
So this box here was done by a student named Valerie Bada. And the title you can see on the top sheet, I usually ask students to write like a narrative, which the students here today did a great job in. And it's called My Life as a Mestiza, Valerie Bada. And the little that I know about it, the discussions that we had about it, was that she considers herself part Chicana and part Apache. And so when you look at the imagery in terms of the symbols, you see some of the traditional symbols that you would see in terms of being Mexicana or Chicana and that whole process. But then you see some of the Native American influence. And she did all these kind of different symbols around here. You can see, you know, Christian symbols and Native American symbols. Up on top, which you can't get access to, there's an actual field of agricultural field. There's an eagle that's been carved in. There's a horse. There's some Native American symbols as well. And I think it just captures what the students were talking about in terms of those dualities and living in those multiple worlds.
So here's a student, and I use the Cajita project in the Foundations of Student Affairs course. These are students that were getting their master's degrees in student affairs. They're going to work in dormitories. They're going to work in financial aid offices, you know, just multicultural affairs offices. I mean, these are students that are at the front lines of working with students. And one of the things that I wanted my students to think about was that it wasn't just about working with those students out there. It was about, who are you as a person? What do you bring to student affairs? What do you bring to the relationship with students? Who or what has influenced your life? What are the special talents that you bring to the student affairs profession? And what kind of an impact do you wish to make with students? So here's one of my students. His family came from Mexico, and he's talking about his Cajita project. And they came and with nothing, they worked in the fields. And So his name is Nabor, and here he is talking about
this is the crossing card for my mom, okay, before we came over to the U.S. This when I was 1 year old, and we came over to the U.S. when I was 9 years old. In 1966, 67, I turned 10 in Plainview, and we went to pick tomatoes in Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio. And we later on went to work in Plainview and other places to pick onions, cucumbers, and also pepinos, cucumbers, and also grapefruit. Never picked oranges, just grapefruit.
Oh, I can tell you that this particular project becomes the most popular in this course. Students actually keep their cajitas in their offices for a long, long time. And here's some other examples. I have students display the cajitas. We do a silent gallery walk. And so everyone's cajita gets viewed. At the end of the gallery walk, I ask for volunteers who would like to share their cajita. I can tell you that by the end of that class, there's hardly a dry eye in the class. Learn things about students that you never thought would happen to them. And so this is just a phenomenal tool. It can be used in K-12. It can be used in higher ed. It can be used in many different fields. Just get creative. It requires our creativity. So I would really recommend the Cajitas project. So online, and I know that all of us are working online right now, how would you do a Cajitas project? Well, you can do it through photography, having students construct their cajitas and take a photo to share with class or multiple photos. Digital storytelling, do a video about the story of the cajita. Ask students if they would like to volunteer sharing their cajitas with their peers, having students write an essay or poem about their cajita, and asking students to share their experience constructing a cajita. How did it emerge? What feelings emerged? What was learned? And you can do this in a shared document or discussion board. They're very personal. And so that's why everything is on a volunteer basis. And if students don't want to share with everyone in class, they may prefer to share it only with the instructor. And we really need to respect that. So let me stop here and see what kind of ideas you have. How would you use the Cajitas project in your online course? And just write a couple of bullets. And I don't know, Tony, if we can have some people actually featured to talk a little bit about what ideas come to them.
And just a brief, thank you, Dr. Rendon. And just a brief point of clarity, my apologies earlier. Your responses were coming in the Q&A feature. We have opened up the chat box, and so we are monitoring now.
Okay.
Anything. And so I can, as you all are generating your responses, I'll go over a couple of the answers that were provided earlier to your earlier question, Dr. Rendon.
All right, perfect.
So some were compassion and creativity, the ability to analyze historic moments, to navigate multiple contexts, perceptions beyond the self. One participant wrote, I would like students to know that there is help out there. Resources are everything. If you look, there will be always something to help. And then also someone wrote, understanding the broader history of the current issues. And so again, if you've got any Q&A, please list them in the Q&A and I can read them out loud.
Yeah, that's excellent. I have to let you know that another strength of students that can be leveraged through the Cajitas project is the strength of giving back. I have found that students, they want to earn their degrees, of course, but it's not just to hang the degree on a wall. They want to earn the degree to make a difference in their communities, to put something back into their communities, to serve as role models for others, to make this world a better place to live. And so we don't do enough to leverage that beautiful asset of giving back. It's one of the things that drove me to do what I do now. Everything I do is to give back to underserved students. Everything I do is to give back to make sure that the experiences of low-income first-generation students stay at the middle of that radar screen. And so I want you to think about that particular strength of giving back, which is just a phenomenal strength that often gets overlooked, unfortunately. All right, what's coming in with
Yes.
the
So
project?
Joaquin Palacio writes, I'm curious how to use this project in science, STEM courses. Chelsea Moore writes, for staff, non-faculty, this could be a great team building opportunity for peers to get to know each other. If it can also be shared with students that come by the office to receive supports. Nina Wright writes, we have STEM students bring an artifact to a class to explain how it relates to their inspirations, motivations to go into the STEM discipline. Britt Patterson writes, photography and storytelling modify the cajita to be second, to be 2D and or on paper.
Yeah. Well, yeah, those are great ideas, and you know, our imagination gets stirred every time, you know, we see these kinds of creative ideas in front of us. But you know, one of the things that the Catch the Next project, Maria Chavez, who has done a lot of work with low-income students and does faculty development in Austin for faculty in community colleges. I mean, one of the things that they do in STEM to develop a STEM identity is they have students create a portfolio of themselves, imagining themselves as STEM students. Because sometimes, you know, Latinx students and other students of color don't see themselves as scientists. They grow up in communities where no one they know is a scientist. They don't even know the term scientist. And so building that identity is something that is very important, and doing these portfolios is one way. I always think about science, and in my other life, I think I would have become a scientist, but life steered me in a different way. But I find STEM fascinating. It's full of awe, full of mystery. You can have students do research projects, interviewing people. For example, right now, the Latinx community, the African-American community is very hard hit by the virus, and doing a project where students could do online interviews with low-income community people about, you know, how they're being impacted by the virus. That would be one thing. I mean, there are also other issues like, you know, poverty, water insecurity, schools that are under-resourced, and going out and studying those schools and comparing them to other schools in the nation, you know, privileged schools versus, you know, low-income schools. That's a huge issue in terms of disparities in America. But, you know, also looking at, you know, how are we being impacted by hurricanes? How are we being impacted by water erosion? And doing, you know, photography or documentary. I mean, it calls for us to be really, really creative. But when we allow students to do these kinds of creative projects, I think they get these aha moments. All of a sudden, they're not just studying STEM or whatever it is. They're taking on projects that have deep meaning for them. They're taking on projects that are inspirational for them. They're taking on projects where they feel they're making an impact, that they're making a difference. And that's the kind of thinking that I think should go into the development of STEM projects. Okay. So let me move to the next example of Sentipensante pedagogy. And this is also another dear friend of mine, Dr. Norma Cantu from Laredo, Texas. She's taught at different places, including UTSA, but she's now at Trinity University. She's the author of a book called Canicula. Laredoans will know that as the dog days of summer. We're kind of getting over them now, but La Canicula is these 100+ degree temperatures. It's an autobiography of her. And she writes the autobiography featuring photographs of her childhood. And so she takes this idea of using photos of, again, you know, memories that have deep meaning for students, and using those photos to have students write from their personal experience. This is very validating for students, because all of a sudden they're being asked to write not you know, looking at something in an abstract way, but writing about something that has deep meaning for them. So here's Dr. Cantu talking about the way she uses photographs through guided imagery. Whoa.
I guess the writing, whenever we work in writing, we're really working with spiritual things. And before I even wrote Canícula, I used to have an exercise for my students to remember a photograph of themselves as children and write about it. And I'm teaching description and commas, sentence combining and all this stuff. But I have them do these guided imagery exercises, and they write. And one student was writing it, and it gets very emotional because it's about themselves and their families and all that. But I guide them. You know, we start with things that are more innocuous until we get to something that's more personal. And you know, they wrote it and went home. And they take it home. They read it in their small groups. They take it home, revise, edit, and then turn it in for me to grade. And this one student came back, and her eyes were puffy, and she said, "I cried all night." She says, "You have helped me to know my mother." How? I had asked them to write, and she went and the picture she remembered was of her mom and she with her kid, her siblings all huddled around her mother. And so she wrote about that picture, and then she started talking to the mother. And so no, she was up working on that paper all night. Came back the next morning and told me this, and was so grateful. I can't say that I can't take credit and say I did it. I allowed it to happen. And those are the kinds of moments. I mean, this is just one example of how something worked.
So again, here you have Dr. Cantu having students learn to write using photographs and writing from that photograph and the memories that come through from that photograph. Very validating academic experience. Here's another one that I think is a great example of Sentipensante pedagogy. It involves what I call contemplative writing and performance. So students not only write, they perform. And this is a poem called Apartment on Austin by Nova Vernable. I don't know if you've seen the documentary Louder Than a Bomb. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. But it is about the world's largest youth poetry slam. It's held in Chicago. And students, many of them from low-income communities, write poems and perform them. And so I was really taken by this particular poem where Nova writes about her experiences as a little girl growing up with her father, who was an addict. And so she took care as a little girl, not only of her father, but her younger brother who suffered from diabetes. Here is Nova with Apartment on Austin.
My father grew up in a neighborhood where he got it bad from both sides, Black people, white people, just because he was mixed. And as a result, because he grew up fighting, he grew up aggressive. And as a father, he was aggressive. When my parents got divorced, we thought that we didn't have to see him anymore. It turned out that we had to go there 4 out of 7 days of the week.
There are always sirens outside your place. Your condo always seemed to lean to the left. The cement windows rusted like overused water pipes. We lived on the first floor.
What she writes about is hardcore, raw stuff. And when she says it, she gets in that place. So when she's on stage, you're there with her.
Our condo door was tainted white, like a 3-year-old sock washed every week. The walls were the 49ers, and the carpet was rough like tangled hair. Everything you had no room for piled onto shelf like children.
I fell into the caregiver role. I took care of him. I braided his hair before he went to work. I ironed his clothes. I woke him up before he went to work.
You would always ask me to make your drinks. Measure liquid with the width of my 9-year-old fingers, 4 fingers sangria, 2 gin, 2 tonic, and 1 lemon juice.
I grew older and I said, I can't do this anymore. And so I left.
By the time I was 10, I was your wife, your sister, your mother, your best friend, and you were bitter. I would feed you chicken soup when you were sick, kiss your forehead to see how bad your fever was. But I'm 17 now, and we don't even talk. And sometimes I wish I could tell you how much I miss you. How I want to wrap my arms around your sunken stomach like tissue paper, that I love you. Wish that you were here to be my Papa G again, so you would know that I have a boyfriend that loves me more than you ever used to. But I guess you're too busy rusting like cement windows to notice that your baby girl is a woman. And how my memory will fade like your 4 finger sangria, 2 gin, 2 tonic, and 1 lemon juice.
My father and I haven't spoken since I was 12. And I feel like I've been trying so hard to just get rid of his memory. I just don't want to think about it anymore.
So I think you can see here from both Dr. Cantu's writing activities using photographs and Nova's poem, the real importance of, having students write from a standpoint that they understand at a deep level. I mean, they're thinking, but they're feeling at the same time. They're thinking, but they're working with emotions at the same time. That's Sentipensante pedagogy. One more example here. This is my dear friend who I consider a mentor, Dr. J Herman Blake. He's retired from Iowa State University. I spent 5 years at Iowa State. And he taught African American studies. The tools that he uses with his students include audio narratives, photos, music, and reflective practices. A phenomenal instructor. I just admire him tremendously. So he taught African American studies. Yes, he covered all the topics, all the leaders, all of the civil rights movement, all of the history, everything was there. But he goes deeper than that. And he engages his students in these very deep learning experiences. Here is Dr. Blake.
I use in the class some of my own material, my own research. I have them listen to, for example, when I talk about slavery, I have them listen to an interview done in 1968 with a woman whose mother was a breeder. And it was her mother's job to have babies. And this woman talks. She was the 15th child of this woman, born just after peace declared, as she put it. She was, I think, 94, 98 or something like this. And I have a picture of her, which I show along with the transcript. I want to tell you, you can't hear that and walk away without thinking. When I get to talking about terrorism and violence, I use about 6 or 7 slides from that book, Without Sanctuary. And I raise 2 questions. Why do they lynch people? And then I show the pictures of the crowds who came to enjoy the spectacle, including young children. And one student wrote an essay saying this course is not only about learning, this course is about thinking. And you think all the time. I use music because the music was used by the people to illustrate these points. So when they hear this woman whose mother was a breeder, I play for them the spiritual, Lord, how come me here? I wish I never was born. When they see those slides about how people have been misused and mistreated, I let them listen to Nina Simone singing Strange Fruit. I just gave a lecture on the civil rights movement, and at the beginning of the 20th century, I had them listen to spiritual, Lord, I couldn't hear nobody pray, talking about the loneliness.
So there you have, just an example of what Dr. Blake does in the classroom, just a very, most powerful African-American studies course. And I just have tremendous respect for the work that he does. So essentially what we're talking about here is a pedagogy that activates the senses, and it fosters deep learning through Sentipensante pedagogy. So essentially you can view it in this way. You begin with your own pedagogic philosophy and theoretical orientation. You think about the equity and justice learning projects that you would like your students to undertake. You choose the illuminative knowledge tools to activate the senses. And then you think about the kinds of outcomes that you would like your students to have. So we can break it down a little bit more. When you think about your philosophy and theoretical orientation, how do you step into the teaching and learning process? What do you believe about teaching and learning? What frameworks guide your thinking? And so there are many frameworks, many theories that could be used to guide your thinking, from asset-based theories to Freire's liberatory pedagogy, critical pedagogy, anti-racist pedagogy, Latina feminist pedagogy, Black feminism, Terrioso's community cultural wealth, validation theory. These are just some examples, but I would urge you to think about what is your philosophy of teaching and learning, because that's how you step into the classroom. And then what are the equity and justice learning projects that you would like your students to undertake? I talked about STEM in just a little while ago, researching virus outbreaks, researching cancer, diabetes, water quality and its impact on low-income communities. In history, the history of racial oppression, interrogating the concept of whiteness, visits to low-income communities and sites of inequity. I had the pleasure last year of going to the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama. What a powerful experience there. Also known as the Lynching Museum. Projects on immigration, hate crimes against the LGBTQ plus community, intersectional perspectives, and radical views of race, gender, sexuality, and identity. These are just some examples. I'm sure that you can think of many more, but I just wanted to give you an example of what I mean by equity and justice learning projects. And then you pick the tools that are going to activate the senses and foster deep learning, from storytelling to autoethnographies, poetry, music, arts-based projects. I won't run through all of those, but you can see that there are many examples of these tools that you can use to activate the senses and to foster deep learning. And so then you think about what are the outcomes that you would like to have. Of course, conocimiento is one of them, the cultivation of knowledge and wisdom. Learning course content, of course, but also developing the students' inner life skills. An elevated level of enlightenment, having a sense of purpose, being self-aware, having that empathy and compassion that we talked about. An elevated sense of critical consciousness and social activism. Liberation, agency, self-care. So those are the ways that you can think about as what you would need to think about as you plan to get into a sensing thinking approach to teaching and learning. In terms of faculty and staff preparation, I think it's very important that all of us have a personal contemplative practice. If we're going to ask students to do this kind of work, we need to do it too. When I ask my students, for example, to turn in a cajita, I come to the class also with my cajita. So if I'm asking students to do something, I do it as well. My own personal contemplative practice, I do transcendental meditation, I do prayer, I do ritual, I do cleansings. Lately, I've been doing Qigong. So having those tools that can help us to look more deeply at our lives and just the greater lessons that are in front of us with whatever we're given is very, very important. So I won't go through all of those others, but you'll see other kinds of preparation that faculty and staff would need to have to engage a sensing, thinking, or Sentipensante pedagogy. So let me turn my attention now to the second half of the presentation, which is about attending to self-care, healing, and well-being. I mentioned earlier that we got a tough card with this pandemic. It's not the card that we wanted, but it's a card that has created what Gloria Saldúa would call un arrebato. You know, this loss of foundation, this, whoa, all of a sudden, you know, we're in this space where we don't know what to do, but we got to do something. And so just so you know, the arrebato comes from Gloria Saldúa, and she's actually a Tejana, born in this very small community, low-income community called Hargill, Texas. I was there a couple of years ago visiting her gravesite. Gloria's work now is known throughout the world. Her archives are at the Benson Library at the University of Texas, the most accessed archives of that library. So she talks about the 7 stages of conocimiento, this sense of enlightenment. To get there, we begin with un arrebato, this loss of foundation, susto, shock. There are many kinds of arrebato. The pandemic is one of them. The fires are another. You know, I mean, when somebody leaves us, that's another. I mean, there's so many different kinds of arrebatos. Stage 2 is nepantla, this in-between space. Right now, we're caught between the old world as we knew it and the new world that is emerging. And then there's another stage of despair. You're like, whoa, I don't know what to do here. But then she talks about a call to action, and stage 5, creating a pattern that speaks to your reality, then testing your story or ideas in the new world, and then transformation. And just when you think you're done, another arrebato comes your way, and you've got to go through all of that. If you can work through that arrebato, learn the lessons, and work through it and struggle through it, the idea is that you come out better, that you are getting closer and closer to being this enlightened human being, to having a high level of conocimiento. So here's some examples of moments of vulnerability. The loss of a loved one, when we're diagnosed with a life-threatening disease, when we lose a job, sexual assault or abuse. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And I had my own arrebato in December, right before Christmas, right around Slaughter Lane in Austin, Texas on I-35. There was a 5-car accident, and we got hit from behind by 2 cars, and then we hit another one in front of us. I'm still working through that arrebato and, you know, neck and shoulder pain that, you know, won't go away. But that was a tough arrebato. And these arrebatos, by the way, I mean, no one should experience them, but we have to be ready for them because life, unfortunately, has a lot of suffering to it. Nobody wants suffering, but suffering is something that is a part of life. But happiness is also a part of life. But there is suffering, and sometimes that suffering has lessons for us, not just happiness, but the suffering does as well. I had another arrebato when my sister in Laredo is in a nursing home, and the nursing home broke out with COVID. So I tried to transfer her, but then the other nursing homes closed down. They weren't accepting transfers, and I can understand why. So finally, about a week ago, I was able to transfer her. So there are many arrebatos that come into our lives. And so I'd like to stop here and just invite the faculty and staff or students, whoever's joining us today. What are you struggling with right now, if you would like to share? What are these experiences in dealing with these unexpected arrebatos. We didn't expect the pandemic. In fact, the arrebatos are usually, some of them are unexpected. So as educators, just a couple of bullet points. What are some of the things that that either you or others you see that they're struggling with right now? What are the biggest challenges given where we are in this space of our lives in the time of a pandemic? Let's see what's coming through.
Absolutely. Dr. Rendon, one of the questions that came in this section of the presentation from Nora Garza, she writes, how do you safeguard the emotions that are brought up? And a response that just came in is, so what are you or faculty in general struggling with right now? The response is students dealing with insecurity and affecting their motivation to perform. Another individual writes, helping my children navigate online school while remote, online teaching and research, and trying to take care of my students as well. Another individual writes, heightened anxiety, unexpected surgery, connection, social injustice, and then students' insecurity about the future, income insecurity. I am supporting my young child online school while working at home and really missing my friends. We've been mostly alone for 6 months.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, another individual writes, struggling with family issues at home while going to school. Someone else writes, not being able to go home to visit family members when becoming homesick because of COVID. And of course, anxiety over my family situation in the Philippines. Right.
I mean, those are really, really, really tough situations, and my heart goes out to you. There are no easy answers for this and for a number of these issues. We can only speak to them and begin to think about them in a way that we can work through that struggle. What I'm about is, yes, I've been giving the pandemic, but I want to lean into it. I want to figure out, why did this happen in the world right now? And why is this happening to me? What are the lessons that I have to learn to become a better human being as a result of what I'm experiencing right now? I got dealt this card. It's not the card that I wanted, but I got to figure out how to play this card. I've got to figure out how to work through this, to get into that struggle and come out on the other side a lot better. Let me go back to Nora Garza from Laredo, Texas. Is that the Nora Garza I know? I think that's who it is. So I'll say hi, Nora. And I'm not quite sure what you mean by safeguarding your emotions. I want to say that maybe you think that you shouldn't show them, but I'm not sure what exactly you mean by that. So if you can elaborate a little bit more, I'll get to you later on in the presentation. Thank you all for sharing. There's something else that I always believed in, is that as tough as my struggle is right now, unfortunately, there are others who are struggling in a worse way. Somebody's not having as much, I'm here, and others have unimaginable struggles to deal with. One of the lessons for me is that when things fall apart is when we have the most to learn. When we work through a struggle and we learn from that, we typically get stronger. We work towards conocimiento. So the arrebato speaks to the strength and the dignity of the human spirit. So here's a quote from Anthony de Mello, and he says, in life, one plays the hand that one is dealt to the best of one's ability. Those who insist on playing, not the hand that they were given, but the one they insist they should have been dealt, those are life's failures. We are not asked if we will play. That is not an option. Play we must. The option is how. So the option now is, how do we play through all of these arrebatos that are coming our way? I mean, this is like a crazy time in the world, una locura, you know, but entre la locura, there's lessons there for us. And so how do we extract the lessons? And that requires deep reflection, I believe. So we're all now living the COVID-19 pandemic. And I went and did some research on this, and I found out that some nations had dealt with the pandemic in a more successful way than others. For example, New Zealand, Denmark, and the Navajo Nation in New Mexico that was ravaged by COVID. So everyone got this card. And this pandemic only seems to come around every 100 years or so. So we were, you know, lucky or unlucky enough to get it. You know, the last pandemic was in 1918. But sometimes we're dealt good cards and other times not so good cards. So how do we play it? And so how did New Zealand play the card? They played it by affirming everyone's responsibility to make a difference. They call themselves a team of 5 million. All the country was united in a singular goal. Denmark, and I was surprised about this, they actually trust the government. There's no conspiracy theories. So if the government said socially distance, they did it. If the government said wear your mask, they did it. In the Navajo Nation, there was also clear messaging. And they had this really beautiful saying about being five-fingered human beings. We're all in this together, said President Ness. That's not to say that these nations are perfect, but they've come through a lot better than other places around the world. So here are some healing and self-care strategies. I'm not going to read all of them, but you can see here about the importance of staying connected to that impulse that brought us to be educators. Why do we do what we do? Forming a support group to help us through. This is something that we need to reach out. We need to reach out to others. Embracing our faith and spirituality. Learning about the work of our ancestors. What were their teachings? Incorporating spiritual and self-help materials into our weekly readings. Leaning into the pandemic. What are its challenges? What are its gifts? What are its lessons? And showing up in the world with love, caring, and compassion. So I want to say a little bit more about, you know, how are we taking care of ourselves? And so let's think about how we're taking care of ourselves, and maybe we can share so that maybe others can have some ideas about what they can do to work through these multiple struggles that we're facing. So let's post some of those comments on the chat function. ¿Cómo se están cuidando? How are you taking care of yourselves? So what's coming through?
So one of the previous questions, Dr. Rendon, from the previous section is, when we ask students to share and then they get very emotional, how do we handle that if we are not trained counselors?
Right, and that's a good question. I want to say that, you know, faculty and staff for the most part are not trained counselors, but I think students will respond regardless to anyone who is authentic with them, anyone who shows caring and empathy. Most of us in life are not trained counselors, and yet when a friend comes to us to ask for assistance, we do the best that we can to help our friend. And that's what I believe students are wanting. Somebody who is validating, somebody who they feel has an open heart, somebody who they feel is really there for them. When we work with students in this authentic, validating fashion, that goes a long way.
Dr. Rendon, a couple of the responses that are coming in from Augusta Pierce, who writes, setting aside time for cooking and listening to music without distractions. Britt Patterson writes, making lots of art,
Yes.
and several emojis that come along with that. Other individuals are indicating, I've been taking time to lay in my hammock and read. setting some time just to cook, spending time alone outdoors with nature, appreciating the outside environment and life, taking care of myself by going out with my animals, counting my blessings. I'm making myself stay connected with friends, despite how easy it is to stay isolated during these times. I'm also talking to my family members who are not in Texas, attending small groups at church, walking early in the morning, watching the sunrise, and listening to Brene Brown's podcast. I am currently taking over-the-counter vitamins. Communications with our family has been crucial in helping us cope with the pandemic. Exercising, crafting, and meditation. A couple of the additional responses are dancing in the kitchen. I like that one.
Music.
Right? Honoring my ancestors, making sure all my loved ones know they're loved. Jill Trujillo writes, resetting in body of water weekly, creating a morning ritual, increasing meditation, maintaining daily, weekly communication with family, wellness, routines with vitamin D increase, and a gratitude journal. Dr. Sherry Ben writes.
That's great. Well, I mean, you all are really doing a great job at taking care of yourselves. This is a very, very tough time, and we need to be gentle with ourselves. We need to take the time to replenish and to really take that time for healing and attending to our well-being. That is as important as all of the work that we do in the academy. So there are examples of strength and courage and resilience all around us. As I mentioned earlier, terrible things should never happen, but they do. We're likely going to get another pandemic. Who knows what's going to happen? Now they're talking about the flu and COVID coming together. Who knows what's going to happen? More things are coming. So we have a choice. We can fall into despair and freeze, fall to pieces like, whoa, I'm not going to do anything more. I'm terrified. Or we can become a dynamic, potent survivor and warrior. I want to give you two examples of these are very young people who went through horrific situations. Where I have it is nothing compared to what they've gone through. They both won the Nobel Peace Prize. In 2018, 23-year-old winner Nadia Murad, an Iraqi woman who became a slave for the Islamic State. And now Nadia is working to bring Islamic State members to justice for war crimes and genocide against the Yazidi people. There's a film on her story. It's called On Her Shoulders. Malala Yousafzai, a Pakistani woman, as a teenager, was shot in the head simply for advocating for women to have an education. She survived, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2014 at age 17. She's been the youngest, and she continues her work. She was not silenced. And then right in our own backyard, we have the example of low-income first-generation students with so many, challenges in front of them. They're succeeding using their own strengths and ways of knowing. They're overcoming multiple challenges and barriers, and they're serving as role models for others. Those are just some examples of strength and courage and resilience. They're all around us. They're in our families. They're in our communities. So give some thought to those people that are around us that have just become warriors in life. The people that we respect and admire for who they are and what they've done. Just last month, on August 4th, there was a horrible explosion in Beirut, Lebanon. That explosion led to 190 deaths, 6,500 injuries, and 300,000 homeless. I was watching the ABC Evening News, and they featured this beautiful video that we're going to play of this woman who worked through her horrific pain. The only thing she could do, as she was surrounded by devastation, was to get on the piano and play auld lang syne. I'm going to stop share because I believe someone is going to play it. So can we play the video, please?
I'm on it.
Jaime.
I'm setting it up right now, Dr. Rendon. Give me 1 second.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jaime, for sharing that. It's a very touching video. And I think it speaks to just the resiliency of the human spirit. We have it in us to deal with these crises. You know, we're being asked to stretch ourselves and to find those strengths that we have, those God-given strengths that we have, to work through so many struggles and challenges that come to us. So this speaks also to an entrenched false narrative that we find in higher ed and actually in other places of work. And one of those narratives is not written anywhere in particular, but it's ingrained in us, is that college life is about work, work, work. And so my friend Wayne Mullers, who's in his book about rest, he says it becomes a standard greeting everywhere. I mean, when we see people, we ask, how are you? We never get, oh, I feel so good today. I had time for everything. Oh my goodness, I feel great. I don't have any stress. We don't get that answer. We get the answer usually, I am so busy. I am so stressed. I don't have time for everything that I want to do. And so we need to build a counter narrative that centers around attention to self-care and well-being is vital. We must reduce faculty, staff, and student stress and burnout. Academics and self-care and healing and well-being go together. They are both equally important. And so I hope that on college campuses, we can create a space, much like you've created today, where we can focus on themes such as community building, introspection, sense of purpose, healing, and relationships. So one of the things that the pandemic has done for me is it's brought the poet out in me. I'm not a professional poet, I should say, but in the spring when we were all struggling, and you know, I don't know how many of you made your own masks or made masks for others or cooked Thanksgiving dinner in March or April or set up Christmas lights in March or April, but I was watching all of these things on TV and how people were dealing with this susto, this loss of foundation. And I began to think about all of that and try to put it together. And so I wrote this poem called Realm Shift. And so it is that we are now being forced to do what we could not imagine doing before. Abruptly, almost without warning, and with our old outworn practices and belief systems, we find ourselves entering a total shift of realms. It is time to evoke the wisdom of our ancestors, philosophers, and sage prophets. As Abdua, she would say that we are now living in Nepantla, in liminality, straddling the old and the new normal. Atwood would admonish that truth is not irrelevant. Indigenous people would remind us that the universe is an inseparable whole. Mama, she would say, ten mucho cuidado, mija, no salgas. All precious wisdom. The virus, the fear, the uncertainty, the chilling tales of other nations have migrated to us. An unfamiliar strangeness has taken over our bodies. Every day begins to feel like a week, even a month, some say. Yes, the virus kills and creates chaos, but it is at precisely these moments of extreme crisis that our human spirit presents itself in uniquely soft, endearing ways. Light, hope, community, sacredness. It's in the balconies of Italy and Spain that burst with song. It's in the women who are sewing homemade face masks for doctors. In the 2-minute prayer requesting a miracle recited at the same time across the world. In the parents who choose to eat dinner every night in the hallway, close to their quarantined daughter. In the people who set up Christmas lights and cooked Thanksgiving dinner in March. In ordinary people who read children's stories online. In virtual watch parties and happy hours with friends. In the first responders who risked their lives to save others. In the priests who walked the streets of Laredo to offer comfort and blessings. Let us remember that darkness can bring forth our finest hour. In this realm shift, we come to know that a new reality is in store for us, a reordered promised land, as Luther King would call it. Now we learn that the I is about the we. And those who are coming behind us will surely ask the questions of the heart. How did we cope? What did we not get right? What did we learn? Is it really true that we can isolate in our togetherness, socially distance to save our relationships, work in a context of uncertainty, confusion, and fear, and yet find a sense of stability? Break open from our rigidity to find a new foundation for humanity. I have hope that we can, as Rilke suggests, to live the questions now as we stumble into the vast territory of answers that defy a choice between one or two options. I have hope that in this realm shift, we will journey to reconnect with the things that really matter, our humanity, our communities, our loved ones, our sense of purpose in this life, to find our perfect centeredness in a shifting reality. And so it is that we find ourselves in this shifting reality. Many lessons to be learned, many examples of the triumph of the human spirit. I hope that we will take time to not just do academics, but to attend to our self-care, our healing, our well-being, our ability to be the best human beings that we can. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been an honor. I love Texas State. And thanks to all of you for joining us this afternoon. I'm going to open it now to Q&A. Thank you. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rendon. At this time, we're going to take any kind of questions in the Q&A feature. You are also invited to use the chat feature so that we can read them here. Dr. Rendon, you're receiving a lot of praise.
Thank you.
Rosemary Aguero Riojas writes, thank you, Dr. Rendon. Beautiful, thank you. Muchísimas gracias. Con Karina Madera.
Thank you so much.
we needed this. It has been a healing time for us with you. Victoria Torres writes, thank you for sharing this beautiful poem. Thank you, this was amazing. Britt Patterson writes, thank you, muchísimas gracias. Smile and heart emojis. Increíble, muchísimas gracias. Gabriela Solis Cavazos says, thank you. Great, powerful, emotional, loved it. Nora Garza, great experience, thank you. Dr. Rendon, this session was healing and helps remind me of why I love my work. Gracias, Dr. Rendon and Texas State. So we have a question from Jill Trujillo. Jill uses she, her, they, them pronouns. How can we, as SA or diversity professionals, advocate for colleagues and students to continue to create a culture of care leaning into the current struggles while creating solutions in a healing framework?
Can you read the question again, please?
Absolutely. So how can we, as professionals in diversity and as advocates, for our colleagues and students to create a culture of care leaning into the current struggles while creating solutions using a healing framework?
Well, I think one of the things that we need to do is to modify the narrative that permeates higher education today. And the narrative is just about work, work, work. And I'm not against work. I mean, obviously I work really hard like all of you, but I think that creating a culture of care now brings in somewhat new language into the discourse of higher education. And so I think that there needs to be a critical mass of people on your campus who begin to say, whoa, let's stop here. We need to pause. We now need to take a look at issues of self-care and healing and well-being, and how can we do this on our campus? And I think that when you get people together with ideas, things can emerge. But if we don't pay attention, if nobody takes charge, if there's no leadership on this, it's going to fall by the wayside, which I think is a mistake. It's a mistake I think we made in the old world. And I hope that we don't make it, I hope that we don't see this again in the new world that is emerging. Because I think that is one of the errors that we made in the past.
Another question, Dr. Rendon, regarding the notion of quote unquote doing good as opposed to one or the other. Texas State has a goal to be a R1 university. It feels like our HSI and R1 responsibilities are not compatible. How do we get these two goals on the same page?
Well, again, people are thinking in either or forms. I would urge you to think of the third and fourth and fifth way. There's no reason why being an HSI can be incompatible. Look, University of California, Santa Barbara is an R1. They're now an HSI. And they're embracing their HSI mission. So turn to those institutions that are Research One institutions that are HSIs. You'll see that those are emerging as well. And so don't view it as either or. View it as, there are ways that all of this can come together. And when they come together, I think they're much more powerful.
Dr. Rendon, another question is, are there other course corrections you see we could take advantage of during this time?
I think one of them is to focus on relationship building, authentic relationship building, validating relationship building with students. Students value these authentic relationships, working with with empathy, with compassion, and with care, especially during these times. is really, really important for our students, validating them, especially low-income students, as capable of doing college-level work. So many of them, unfortunately, have internalized the notion that they're not good enough. And so we need to shatter that thinking and help them to believe that they have the abilities, and when we provide the resources and the mentoring and the advice and the counseling and the resources that they need, I think, you know, that most of them can get through. So that's another thing that I think needs to be done for sure.
Gracias, Dr. Rendon. Another question that just came in was, how can we address el arrebato with elementary age students in a sensitive and respectful way?
Well, I mean, all of this, I think, should be done regardless of grade level in a respectful way, because they are sensitive issues. And so I haven't dealt with little kids. My work has been with college level students and faculty. But I would say, you know, kids are very, they're very smart. You know, they can pick things up, and they know when you know, we're not really being authentic and caring with them. And so I think it needs to start there with communicating authentic care, and maybe having them in, you know, if they're afraid to share person to person, I think one of the things online learning can do is they can share anonymously about some of the things that they're experiencing, or they can ask to share with you as the teacher or the counselor. So we need to be creative about how we're going to work with little kids, but they're very resilient. I have high hopes for our next generation. We need them to take over where we left off, and we need great teachers and counselors in our school systems for sure.
One additional question that just came in: how do we help our education communities reimagine education so we do not reproduce the same systems?
I think it's going to take a critical dialogue. And I think that it's going to take people coming together and saying, we'd like to think now, we want to think differently. And one of the things I'm learning from working with a number of colleges and universities throughout the nation is that one of the things the pandemic has done is it's opened us up to new ways of being, to new ideas. It's opened us up to thinking more deeply about race and about discrimination and about oppression. And so we need to take advantage of this space and time when that openness exists to get this done, because it may close on us. It may close on us. It's open right now. And we need to now leverage that opportunity, get groups of people to come together on campus and begin to think about, what did we not get right in the past? What do we want to change? And what do we need to do differently? Bring the best of what worked in the past, modify that didn't work so well, delete that is terrible, and then move on to create a new vision of education. But it's going to take dialogue and planning for that to happen.
And I think this additional question here falls in line with exactly as you're indicating, Dr. Rendon. Celia Gonzalez writes, focusing on well-being is important right now during the pandemic. How do we continue the conversation once it's over and people want to get back to, quote, back to business as normal?
Well, we have to be watchful. You know, we're going to have to be, you know, really careful about not going back to the same ways that were not working before. If we do that, we've lost this opportunity. We have lost it. And it may not come again for another 100 years. So we can't afford to lose this opportunity that we have right now. So I'm pleased, for example, to see that you wanted me to focus on self-care and well-being. You're not the only campus that has reached out to me like that. And that tells me that there are people across the nation, even across the world, that are interested in this. There is a huge opening right now for us to bring that dialogue into the mainstream of higher education. I'm working with the John Gardner Institute as on the board of directors, and it's one of the topics that I brought to John, who's a dear friend of mine from the time I was at South Carolina in the 80s. And I think we're gonna do something along those lines. I'm not sure what it's gonna be, but there will be organizations that will take the leadership, and once a place like Gardner or AACNU begins to talk about these things, then it becomes okay for colleges and universities to talk about these things. But you can do this on your own as well. You're doing it right now, so that's great.
Professora Rendon, thank you so much for your time, your energy, your blessings, just the wonderful stage that you offered us. We are very much in debt to all that you offered us. Thank you for spending a little bit of time with us to be able to focus particularly on how important self-care is and as an act of resistance.
Oh, absolutely. It's been my honor, and I'm so blessed to be with all of you, and I wish you the best, and you're on your way. You created an opening here for great things to happen. I'm going to be watching all of you. I'm only an hour away to see where you wind up on the other side. So best wishes.
Muchísimas gracias.
Igualmente.
So at this time, we're going to transition over to Celia Gonzalez, who serves as the Director of Developing Hispanic Serving Institutions, STEM Impact and Project Maestros. Celia?
Hello, buenas tardes, Dr. Rendon. So nice to see you. Thank you for being here with us. I am so happy to have you here. It's very exciting to be able to hear you and connect with you and engage with you. Just sharing your expertise with us, not only in understanding how to support and serve our students, but attending to ourselves and well-being is so refreshing to me. It's so refreshing to hear you say that, because it is important for us to continue to build those relationships and validate our students. And so, it really affirms, those, not only my personal beliefs, but those beliefs that we have, as an institution and serving our students as an HSI. And your mission and your approach very much aligns with these grants, with us being the developing HSI grants, that Dr. Brown brought to this institution. It really aligns with our values of being authentic and being present and being there to be able to engage with our students. And I don't know if someone shared this with you already, but 39% of our students identify as Hispanic on campus, and 46% of our students are first gen. And so it's so important for us to be aware of that and mindful of that, and know that that information and who our students are, so that we are able to support them whenever they are coming through their educational journey with us. So we definitely are very mindful of that. And this is our 9th year as an HSI. We've been an HSI now for since 2011. And so it really is a significance to have you here, and engage with us in this conversation, and really allow us to focus on where we want to take this initiative, moving forward, and looking at faculty development differently, and how we want to honor those experiences that those students bring, and of course, what the faculty is doing and what they're experiencing at the same time, that the students are experiencing this. So again, I am very, happy to see you here, and excited, that you were able to bring this wealth of knowledge with us in every aspect in this holistic approach that you share with us, Dr. Rendon. It's so affirming to me, and you serve as a role model to me. So I'm glad to be here and share this space with you, and I'm very appreciative of the Office of Institutional Excellence and the partnerships we develop with them, and the TRIO programs, and bringing this all together for the sake of all of our students. And again, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you, Sylvia. Pleasure to be with you.
And now I'll have Mr. Ray Cordero, who will come in and share the closing remarks with us. Ray.
Good afternoon, and Dr. Rendon, can you hear me all right? I'm on my headphones. Unfortunately, you're not gonna be able to see me because my camera's having some difficulties, but I'm trusting you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I've got some written remarks here. First of all, I want to thank you so much for your time and such a needed session. So much valuable information that's applicable across so many different areas. It is nice to know that we have such a powerful colleague just an hour up the road. Every time I'm in San Antonio, I'll be thinking about you. Fortunately, there's a pandemic right now. Most people that know me know I'm a pop-in kind of guy, but that won't be happening. So I would just want to say thank you. For those on the line that are not familiar, my name is Ray Cordero, and I serve as the senior director for TRIO programs at Texas State University. At Texas State University, and I'm also the president of the Texas TRIO Association. Here at Texas State, we house currently 6 TRIO programs with an annual budget of $2.1 million. TRIO programs are particularly significant for our great university because they were created via the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964 and the Higher Education Act of 1965, which, as you all know, was signed on our campus by our most famous alum, President Lyndon Baines Johnson. In addition to TRIO programs, the HEA gave birth to a number of things, which also includes the term first generation. What began as an idea for educational opportunity with TRIO has transformed into a $1.1 billion machine centered on first generation non-traditional educational access and student success. Today, TRIO serves over 900,000 students across the country, with over 62,000 students served in the state of Texas. It was called TRIO because of the 3 programs first created by the HEA and the EOA: Talent Search, Upward Bound, and Student Support Services. TRIO has taken center stage in education because of the pipeline it creates from K-12 education into higher education platforms. The populations we serve in target schools in our communities are the students who have and will continue to arrive on the doorsteps of post-secondary institutions. The very students who have all too often been met with closed doors now hold the key to higher education survival. I'll say that one more time. The very students who have too often been met with closed doors now hold the key to higher education survival. And there's a saying that I use with my TRIO colleagues on campus and across the country. In education, particularly this landscape, the key to ensuring student success is simple. You can be first or you can be smarter, but it's a lot easier to be both. The game has changed and we know that. Being an educator requires more hats than ever. You have to be a predictor of passion, a connoisseur of challenge, and have a fundamental fixation on the power of family. And you have to do all of this while still taking care of you. We won't get there overnight, and we may not get there in a year or 2 years, but the most important thing is that we get up and we meet the challenge with grace, compassion, and care. Now, I want you to imagine with me in closing. Imagine it's 1965, and you're envisioning a national initiative for educational access and equality at a time when the country is showing its deep-seated roots of hatred and bigotry. Imagine being in a classroom and no one looks like you or comes from where you come from. Now imagine the work of generations before you paving the way to ensure fair and just opportunity for education. Imagine being scared to take your most authentic self with you into a high school classroom. Imagine having to be strong in every definition of the word while being a student, a son, a daughter, a brother, a sister, a teenager. Imagine enduring insurmountable odds at a time when the hardest decisions in life should be what line you should stand in for lunch with your friends. Imagine getting into the school of your dreams and imagine the anxiety and stress that may bring. Imagine a pandemic. Imagine a longer pandemic. Imagine a much longer pandemic. Remember what you knew before and imagine what tomorrow will bring us. Thank you, family. Dr. Rendon, thank you so much. We really appreciate having you here. If there are any closing remarks, I will yield to the rest of the dais should we need to make them. And to all of my colleagues at Texas State, we wish you a good afternoon.